Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons Fighter! He's a simple, boring class, but if you complain, he'll kick your ass. I'm rolling for initiative! Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic User! You want spells? He's got them all, but all he needs is Fireball! Boom! Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Cleric! He'll heal that wound on your head, and if he's too slow, he'll raise the dead. My God's better than yours! Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Thief! He'll unlock the doors, disarm the traps, and when you're not looking, he'll gank your crap. I move silently. Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons. Now let's do the subclasses. Paladin. He's a fairy tale knight who you would imagine. He'll save the princess and kill the dragon to march into hell for a heavenly cause. Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons. Ranger. With his bow, he's an artist fighting goblins in the forest. Twang! Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Illusionist! There is nothing he can't do, but nothing that you see is true. You trust your senses? Ah! Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, the Druid! The wild is all that he's about. In a dungeon he freaks out. Flora and fauna, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Assassin! He'll toss a rock to make a sound and cut your throat when you turn around. What am I even doing here with these losers? Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons. How many of these classes are there? We're almost done. Monk! He's a master of Kung Fu and Grandmaster of Flowers too. Don't think, feel. Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Bard! You've never seen a cooler cat. A mandolin is where it's at. Barbarian! No, wait, he's not in the player's handbook. We let him in. We got to do the thief, acrobat, and cavalier. You gonna tell him he can't come in? Barbarian!